Okay, so we are wrapping up on our character. This is going to be the last couple of videos on actually texturing our characters, and we're in the place now where we're actually able to put colors on things, to start creating the palette for our characters. Now, if your character comes from a design, of course you have the palette there, but interpreting and understanding why those colors were chosen and what they mean for your character is really important. So what we're looking for more than anything with character design is clarity, especially when it comes to games. For films, like the shapes are often really iconic. If we look at Mario as a really good example, Mario has a very distinctive silhouette, and it makes him indistinguishable, like absolutely distinguishable from other characters, even in the Mario universe. You'll notice that Mario and Luigi's proportions started as the exact same character with a different recolor, and over time, they've made Luigi more exaggeratedly tall and thin, and Mario a little shorter and stockier. And they do this with all the characters in the Mushroom Kingdom because they want you to be able to see in an instant who they are while still making them very clear. They also do this with the characters' palettes. Mario has a very classic blue and red with a little bit of white in their palette, and then a few neutral colors between his skin tone, his hair, and his boots. We see the same colors relatively repeated. Eyebrows and mustache are the same color, hair is the same color roughly as the boots, skin color and the soles of the boots aren't that far off from each other. This kind of clarity gives us fewer colors to work with. And sometimes we get to this problem when we're designing or developing or texturing characters. We have this infinite canvas of millions and millions of colors. And what we really need to do is pick just a few distinct ones to make our characters more memorable. This is an example of like why a kind of character design I think doesn't work well. For this exact reason. So again, Mario, clear, distinct colors. This is like, look at the silhouette. It's hard to read. Is this a hat? Is this some sort of motorcycle? Or is it a backpack that's sitting on the character? Where do the legs actually start? Are these boots or are these ankle spikes? Like we see in this character all of these things, and where Mario's palette is simple and relatively clear, this character's palette is all over the place. It's got greens, it's got reds, it's got blues, it's got yellows, it's got all sorts of different. There's like what, a couple different, there's this red color, then there's this red color, which is the same as this red color, but then this is like a different leather color than that. So, but it's also a different leather color than this, and it's a different leather than that. It's all over the place, not to mention all the sort of crystal patterning, something we don't see anywhere else on the character. And then this is one metal, but it's a different type of metal than that, which is a different type of metal than is on here. And what are this on the boots? Is that meant to be a metal? Because that's like, again, a fourth different type of metal. It's all over the place, like I said. And there's so many converging different lines and shapes. Not only would this character take a really long time to do, it's so busy. And it's, did you even see, like, this is the character's other hand? And it's hard to tell, oh, while you really look at it, it's actually the character's fingers flexing backward, but you can't quite read that. And why two different gloves? It's all over the place. So this is like what kind of like, if you squint your eyes, you just can't see anything. And this is the kind of character design that becomes bland and forgettable. We like silhouettes. Silhouettes really stand out to us. And that kind of, this is where the clarity comes in. And this is why texturing should be everything inside of the silhouette. Pokemon is a great example. If you think about Pokemon, they had to come up with 151 unique monsters with a limited number of pixel count with each of them. I think it's something like, they're only like 64 by 64. It's a pretty small pixel count overall, but they only had 3 colors to work with because some of the colors are determined by the background screen. So a very, very limited palette of 3. I guess technically you can consider it 4 because some of the see-through colors, but like 4 colors to come up with 151 distinctively different Pokemon, which is why the Who's That Pokemon thing works, is because they focused, they didn't have color to work with, they didn't have this wide range of palettes, all they could work with was silhouette. Now, when you're trying to exaggerate or put your stuff into these characters, now that we have their sculpts and their body and their bases, you start to think about something unique, something that is about your character and what you want to focus on. Every character should have their one thing. I think Shovel Knight does this really well. It's literally Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight is defined by a shovel, and the details of the rest of Shovel Knight's armor are shovel-like. And in fact, all of the different characters for Shovel Knight, you can see, have their own distinctive shapes, and they also have their own exaggerations that are distinct to them. They have one thing they do. Plague Knight has bombs. Spectre Knight is a dead ninja. King Knight is regal and it's all about treasure. They have one trait that they really focus on. This is a sort of dragging combo man over here, which is a product tie-in Marvel superhero character that is a real thing in the Marvel universe that was with these snack food combos and is literally a combo of everything. I don't know. This is the superpower of having the Human Torch's knees. So there you go. Combo, man. When we combine too many things and too many styles, we end up creating something not more interesting, but ironically something less interesting. So this color theme is really important. I think, like, again, superheroes do this really well. You'll notice our primary colors of red, blue, and yellow tend to be reserved for our heroic characters, although we got Thanos over here with blue and yellow, although that's why they gave his skin that distinctively purplish color, because it pulls him a little bit more into the villain camp. Villains in classic comic books tend to be more in those in-between colors. We call them the secondary colors, so greens, purples, and oranges. Again, an exception here being the Incredible Hulk is green and purple, and yet the Incredible Hulk and his original iteration is sort of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where he wasn't exactly a hero. There were aspects of him that were a little untrustworthy. He didn't really have control over his Hulk form and sometimes was portrayed as a villain in some stories. Or a character like Hawkeye, who actually started as an Iron Man villain and then later became good, starts with that purple and blue palette. Whereas, in here, it's primarily heroes are in these primary color palettes. So the theme has a lot to do with who we interpret the character as. When we're doing these, everything that you're doing, especially for costume design, as we talked about clothing, your research is really important. So something like, I went to this really interesting costume gallery. They did all the costumes of Star Wars. It was 90% the work that was done on Padme Amidala from the prequels costuming, because they did so much research with it. They found so many different combinations of different dresses and different styles from all over the world to remix and reinterpret and combine into something new. And so it was something that was different but felt familiar. And when you're researching your own characters, they probably have clothing that's based off of something historical, something real. And that's where we're dragging those research in, is to look for little details. Look for little etchings or look for small sort of ceremonial details that you can find in other clothing to drag into your character to add more detail that maybe the concept artist even had. So this is where these colors, this costuming, this detail can go a really long way. These are the first three protagonists of the first three Assassin's Creed games. I mean, at this point, I could keep extending it further and further. And what I love about this is not only does it show how important detail and color is and costuming detail, but it also shows kind of what the poses do for our characters. So here I have the character from the first Assassin's Creed game, Altair, who is a part of the Assassin's Guild, the first character in the series. And all three of these characters are white-clad assassins of the exact same order in the exact same genetic lineage. And so we see here Altair, and he's wearing white. But what else do we notice about him? Well, his profile doesn't give away enough. He looks very serious. He's very stoic. The details of his costuming tell you something about his monk-like roots, as well as the sort of medieval setting that he's in through the costuming, the detail. But he's pretty close to the chest. Most of his weapons are not in the silhouette, so they don't draw too much attention to us. He doesn't present as a threat. We see one thin, hand blade hidden by the character, so we don't actually see it very well. The whole idea is it's all about the hidden blade and the hidden strike, something that can come suddenly, but otherwise he can blend into a crowd very easily. Ezio, the character from the second Assassin's Creed game, instead is open and flashy. His personality is much more flamboyant. We see more distinctively a lot more red and a lot of this opening with the character. Feet are close together, almost like an acrobat, as opposed to the evenly placed feet of Altair in a very neutral pose. Sort of creates this diamond shape with his pose, more top heavy, more open. The weapons here aren't hidden as much. Instead, the two assassin's blades are being flourished openly and brandished. So the character has a lot of the styling and detailing of Renaissance France and Italy. We can see right in here, primarily Italy, I suppose. But a lot of red, a lot of like sort of the poofy costuming, but still the focus drawing our attention up and out to the character. And then we get to Connor, a character from a time that takes place during the American Revolution. Connor shows his own combination of colonial and native traditions. We still see the white, although a little dingy because he's on the frontier. He's a frontiersman as much as he is an assassin. But also, look at the pose. Wider stance, more openly aggressive, from the very subtle Altair to the point where the weapon is open and it's brandished distinctively. It's being shown. The character has several weapons that feed into his silhouette, showing us who he is, as well as showing us the, again, colonial dress and detailing. So 3 different characters that, from the stance of their models, their costuming, their dress, aren't that different. They're very similar, but it's the details that tell us that they're different from each other in personality. When we're looking for detail, I really feel like less is significantly more. Again, looking at something like this Alex Ross Superman is classic and it's iconic and it has just enough information to keep your brain interested. Versus this is Shatterstar, a Rob Liefeld creation. Rob Liefeld was known for just adding detail on detail on detail on detail. He's sort of mocked often for adding pouches all over characters. He liked these big vests. He liked these kind of headgear hat things. He liked braids and swords on the backs and ponytails and big muscles with lots of hatched lines. And you start adding so many details, it starts to detract from the character design. Similarly, I think Wind Waker, the original Wind Waker, and I believe this is Final Fantasy XII, came out at similar times, and Wind Waker's visual design has aged very well, and I feel like a lot of these mid-2000s Final Fantasy games have not. For instance, it's hard to see what's happening in this scene, and you don't even notice at first. There's like a lizard guy here. The legs have all these belts and buckles on them, but the character kind of blends into the background and everything's so blue that it's all bleeds together. There's nothing distinct about it, and it becomes less memorable because it just turns into white noise. Details are really important. So just like with Altair and Ezio and Connor, we want to see that these costumings are consistent. This is the reason in the Back to the Future movies, Marty's costume and dress is relatively consistent and intentionally so through the movie. In the first movie, he's wearing a pretty typical 80s kids outfit. However, it's got enough distinctive personality. The costume design of giving him this denim jacket with a vest over it makes him more noticeable. The red helps him stand out from some of the other more neutrally dressed characters without having him to dress too loud. When we travel to the future to pretend to be his son, this is the jacket they give him, and you can see it has some of the same red and sort of on blue, as well as he's got the same sort of undershirt. This isn't just a continuity thing for the movie. They wanted to intentionally give him a dress that made him look familiar to the character he was dressed like in the beginning, because it's easier for audiences to go, oh, I'm watching Back to the Future 2. That's the same guy from the first one. And the cowboy outfit that he starts wearing in Back to the Future 3 is again intentionally picking up the blue and red, although in a joke pastel kind of way. He won't keep this outfit for the movie. They do this as a joke at the beginning of the movie, but I did it intentionally because we've associated Marty with these blue and red color motif. And so we need to start him in blue and red so that we can dress him later in more accurate period clothing, but we want to remind audiences this is the same character from the first movie. Details are something that actors put into their characters without really telling anybody. One of my favorite examples of this is Aldo Raine from Inglourious Basterds, in which the actor Brad Pitt and the director Quentin Tarantino know how and why the character of Aldo Raine has a large scar, a kind of scar that is often associated with lynching or hanging. So meaning that he would have been hung at some point almost to death, but clearly isn't dead. And the only two people that know the story of it for the character are the actor and the director, because it helps inform the performance. And it's the same thing with the details we're putting into these characters. you can put stories and detail into the textures that our audience, our viewers, our players never really know about, but it etches into the history. It's like carving into the bark of a tree. It gives it history, sort of the rings as they go, and it helps inform us to create more things about the character by thinking about a fictional backstory. So when you're taking your characters and you're putting textures and grime and grunge and things like boots, or you're adding extra details into corners or crevices, ask yourself, who is this character? Where do they come from? And what have they done in their lives to get to this place? Because that's going to tell you a lot about the details you put into things. All right, in the next one, I'll show you a couple tools and tricks we can use in Painter, and then we'll get texturing our characters.